You know what they say, never talk about politics, religion, or sex, lest you risk damaging your friendships. But what happens when you have three people whose friendship is built on debating those very topics? One's a believer surrounded by skeptics, one's a heterosexual surrounded by gays, and one's a moderate surrounded by extremists, and they're all hardly qualified. Introducing Hardly Qualified, a podcast recording in prosperous Calgary, Alberta, where Will Conner, Rob Walker, and AngryDuck get together every week to discuss the issues of the day. Rob's on the left, Ducky's on the right, and Will's stuck in the middle. They're hardly qualified to pontificate about the topics they're talking about, but if nothing else, they're entertaining.
Okay, so that was the new intro with Maya. We did Willie's last week and we did Maya's this week just to see how they sound and give us your feedback. Tell us which one you like better. Anyway, I'm AngryDuck and this is the Hardly Qualified podcast. Yeah, I can't even say it right. Hardly Qualified podcast. This is for the weekend of the 17th. We're recording this once again on the 12th. But we're going to be delaying the release of it, or have delayed the release of it, because Bob will not be in the country on that weekend. So, yes. Well, welcome to episode 2.
For January 26th, or 5th, 25th. Whatever. You know when you're listening to this.
You know what day it is. Don't rely on us.
You can be listening to this on the 3rd. What do we know? It's not going to self-describe. It's not some Get Smart type of podcast.
Anyway, this is episode 2. If you remember, last week we talked about some silly nonsense, and you can go back. And this week we're going to be talking about more silly nonsense, and hopefully you like listening to us talk about silly nonsense, because you're back for episode 2.
And maybe 10% of it is sense, maybe?
Sense? That doesn't really sound like a whole lot of fun, though.
Oh, okay. I have a lot of fun when I make sense.
You know, I have to compliment you, Ducky, on your lack of profanity last week. I was quite impressed. I think we might actually be able to get away with not using the explicit tag in iTunes.
I think that's true, actually. I didn't notice until you just mentioned.
I don't know. I did say fuck a couple of times at the beginning. So.
Oh well, now you screwed it up for this thing. Okay, well, whatever.
Come on, Ducky, you can do it.
Don't be such a.
Wow, rude.
Wow. And sexist. But anyway.
Yeah, no.
I don't think that's sexist.
Okay,
how is that
sure
sexist?
It is. Sure
Whatever, that's not sexist.
I'm just gonna edit that out because I don't want to argue about it. So.
Let's just not argue about it, and we don't have to edit it out.
All right. So, Rob, you're not going to be with us next week. We are going to replace you with somebody else.
Okay.
Or substitute you, rather.
Yes, I'm so easily replaced.
Yeah, so
Thanks,
tell
guys.
us what's going on in the UK. How long are you there? What are you doing?
So I'm there from January the 19th until February 1st. And it's apparently, they are calling it an induction, which is basically a 10-day or whatever it is orientation period for people who are doing my degree online. But they want all of us to show up for 2 weeks every school year just to do research methodology stuff and checking with our supervisors, and our supervisors can whip us into shape if we're going way wrong. And I'm sort of nervous because it'll be my very first time outside of North America and driving on the left and all that wonderful jazz.
Are you going in through Heathrow?
I am flying I'm flying from De Gaulle in Paris to Birmingham, to the international airport in Birmingham.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, so.
You're going to Paris. Is it a layover in Paris?
For 2 hours.
I don't think that counts as a layover.
No, it really doesn't, because I just won't be able to leave the airport.
Let's backspace here for a second. You said driving on the left? Are you actually going to be driving while you're there? Or are you,
No.
Okay.
It'll just be culture shock and needing to move around on my own. And
whereabouts is Birmingham?
Oh.
In UK?
Northern England.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's that clarifies everything.
Yeah. Northern England, that's not Scotland.
Yes.
Well, you know what? The entire country is like 60% the size of, or Alberta is 60% the size of the entire country. So, whatever.
What? No, it's the other way around.
Ah,
You
you
can
know
fit
what?
all of Great Britain inside Alberta.
And
with
then
Ireland,
some.
too.
Yeah.
And Iceland, and part of Greenland.
You know, my uncle came over from Paisley and spent 2 weeks in Calgary with my parents, or a week or whatever it was, and then was being driven up to Edmonton, where my extended family lives, to see my grandfather. And he got to Airdrie and started complaining about the length of the drive and how onerous it was and how long it was taking, and apparently wouldn't stop. And I'm thinking, you know, we make the Calgary to Edmonton run. That's what, 2.5 hours. You do that several times a month, and they don't really travel much on the roads there. So it's definitely going to be pretty different.
So I will just say for the record that according to Google Maps, Birmingham is in West Midlands, and I have no idea whether that's considered north. And I assume not, because it's called Midlands. So...
Well, at least you're not in the East Midlands. I mean, who wants to go
Those
there?
bastards,
I have
right?
no idea. Yeah, well, you know, I'll let you know.
I want you to do me a favor while you're there.
I'll do my best. What can I do for you?
I want you to listen to how they speak.
Yep.
And see if you can pick up on any sort of distinctions in pronunciation and accents between the different areas in England that you're.
I will try to, because apparently I've been told by people from the UK that Birmingham actually has a very distinct way of speaking, so I'll see if I can duplicate it reasonably well by the end of my
I just want you to tell me if it's noticeably different. That's all, because you know my experience with English accents is from two sources. It's from Bristol, and it's from Dick Van Dyke with his, you know, "Shut your shoe, governor,"
and Cockney accent.
Right? So, pip pip cheerio, I'm a chippy sweep, I am. Right, so.
Well, now that we've alienated everybody in the UK,
no doubt. I'll have to hand this podcast to my friend Peter Hairsnape and see how much he rolls his eyes.
Well, normally at this time we'd say, "What have you been doing in the past week?" But seeing as our week was about 10 minutes long, I went to the bathroom. Not that anybody cares.
Me too.
I ordered some food. I have two sitting in front of me, but I'm really hesitant to eat them while we're recording because I'll just be like, or I'll mute my mic and then I won't be able to interrupt people.
God bless you.
So, yeah. For those of you who aren't aware, this is actually being pre-recorded a week ahead of schedule because Bob's actually not here right.
Yeah. Right
as
now,
this airs,
being in the future. Yes.
Yes, sir. This is for
English.
futurism's sake.
Yes. English grammar when things haven't happened yet.
Yeah. No wonder ESLers have such a hard fucking time.
Yeah.
I mean,
I don't know what you're talking about. Pre-recorded's redundant.
Awesome.
Can't really do it afterwards, as George Carlin says.
That's funny.
That's great.
Yes, it is redundant. Okay, so woo. All right. So what are we going to talk about today, guys?
Well, I think I'm going to scrape the fodder bucket, and I see that there is a link to the White House website, whitehouse.gov,
Yes.
and that'll be in the show notes. Apparently, there was a petition. Well, here, I'll read it. By focusing our defense resources into a space security platform and weapon systems such as the Death Star, the government can spur job creation in the fields of construction, engineering, space exploration, and more, and strengthen our national defenses. And there were 34,435 signatories to that petition, to which the White House responded that
This
a
isn't
Death Star
the petition response you're looking for.
Exactly.
Ha.
While they shared the desire for job creation and strong national defense, a Death Star isn't on the horizon for a few reasons. The construction of Death Star has been estimated to cost more than $850. I'm going to go with trillion dollars.
Not
Quadrillion.
No, it's quadrillion. It's like 10 to the power of 17 or something. It's a
Okay.
big fucking number.
They're working hard to reduce the deficit, not expand it. Maybe that's a Bush era thing project. I don't know. But anyway, the administration does not support the blowing up of planets. And why would they spend countless taxpayer dollars on a Death Star with a fundamental flaw that can be exploited by a one-man starship?
Well, you know what they need to do? They need to build a Death Star, and then they need to ban small starfighters. That's it. We need starfighter control.
And it begins.
And it begins. Yeah. Besides,
A well-regulated...
this government is. I find it a little disingenuous for this administration to claim that they're dedicated to the reduction of the deficit. So, but other than that, I really like the fact that they took it seriously and replied to it reasonably seriously.
Well, tongue in cheek.
Well, I think it was replied to in the spirit that it was given, so I like that a lot.
I don't know. There might actually be some people out there who were serious.
Yeah, I hear you.
And have you ever heard of Poe's Law?
Yes.
Okay. No. Okay. Poe's Law, but it was written by a philosopher guy. It's not Edgar Allan Poe. It's some other guy, Daniel Poe or something. And basically, he said that there is no caricature or mockery of extremism that you can make that there isn't somebody, or that somebody will not take seriously. So basically, what it means is that you can't pretend or make a parody of extremism without somebody taking you seriously. And what we end up doing is we refer to people who make those kinds of parodies as Poes. And it's really hard sometimes when they're being dead serious in their discussion or whatever, to tell if they're being genuine or whether or not they're just, satirizing or mocking the issue.
I'm actually looking at Rational Wiki's entry, and they give a really good example.
And that'll be in the show.
So it's basically what you just said, Ducky. And Poe's law is an axiom suggesting that it's difficult, if not impossible, to distinguish between parodies of religious or other fundamentalism and its genuine proponents, since they seem both equally insane. For example, some conservatives consider noted homophobe Fred Phelps to be so over the top that they argue he's a deep cover liberal trying to discredit more mainstream homophobes.
More mainstream homophobe? What the hell does that mean?
Yeah, no doubt.
The legitimate homophobe.
Yes, the bigotry that's okay, apparently.
Yeah.
You
but
posted,
it's a good example, though, still.
Yeah. But I mean, that is a good example, because there's people who take him seriously and there's people who think he's fucking crazy.
Yeah. Well, yes.
So my point is that there were probably a couple of people who signed the petition for the Death Star that were legitimately,
hoping,
interested in the idea that the government made a Death Star.
Mm-hmm.
Besides, I don't know if I'd want the government to be in charge of that kind of super weapon.
Because I'm not very enamored of the state, I'm not sure that I'd want private enterprise to be building the Death Star either, just so you know.
To be fair, if it was a
mercenary Death Star for hire,
if it was a private enterprise, it would be a Death Moon because they have a sense of appropriate scale.
Yeah.
But
that's not a
touche.
So I guess that brings us on to Mars One.
Yeah, absolutely. Mars One. I think this is a brilliant idea. Do you guys know what I'm talking about when I say Mars One? Because I didn't put any links up.
Refresh my memory, please.
Okay, Mars One is a private venture that has basically said this is what we're going to do. We're going to get a bunch of people together, we're going to train them as astronauts, and we're going to privately colonize Mars by 2025.
Holy shit.
Or at least have people on Mars by 2025 without any government control or oversight. And basically they're trying to say what we need to do is we need to finance an expedition to Mars and beat the government there. Because if the government's there, then the government will control it, and then you'll end up with just another position for, more government control. And I think that's why it really appeals to me, because it's opening up a new frontier to private citizens, just like the New World did, or the American West did, where there was, the frontier pioneer spirit for individuals. And I really like the idea of having the citizenry go there first and have the government follow rather than the other way around.
And of course, the first pornography transmitted from Mars is going to be somebody mooning Curiosity, right?
Well played, sir. Well played.
So I'm assuming this is a one-way trip.
No, I guess kind of, yeah, they want to put people there to start colonizing it. So they said that they've got this whole 10-year program designed to train people in everything that they need to learn, as well as all the survival skills they'll need, or an 8-year training program or something. I don't remember the specifics, but they're looking for people who are intelligent, they're looking for people who are quick thinkers, and they're looking for people who don't have any degenerative health defects, so that they can train them into being effective astronauts and colonists.
Well, that excludes us, I guess.
Yeah, well, it excludes me.
so.
My asthma is probably, the fact that I'm out of shape probably is something that could be rectified, but the asthma
Rounds of shape.
What? Rounds of shape? I'm just not a triangle like the rest of you fuckers. But yeah, I think that's a brilliant idea, and if I was in a different body, I would totally be part of that, I think. Unless I should expect them to make reasonable accommodation.
Well, that's a dig
For our
from
listeners,
a couple weeks back.
Yes,
Jeez.
that is a not so subtle dig at Rob.
Yeah, well, but see, here's the
Throwing
thing.
grenades.
I do actually think that they will have to at least consider that in the second generation, because even if you don't send disabled astronauts to Mars, there have been no human children born off-world yet.
Yeah.
So disability and reasonable accommodation will be a live issue for everyone in the second generation. So I hope they're already thinking that through.
Well, maybe. I think they need to make sure people can breathe first, though.
But hey,
So,
if you're running out of air, what are you going to do? You're going to have sex. So.
What are the effects of being in a microgravity environment for so long, too, right?
This is it, right? Yep.
Well, Mars isn't microgravity. It's, 0.7 or 0.8 G? It's not like the moon or orbit.
Okay, well, that's still a fraction, but, there is the 9-month or 6-month trip or whatever it is.
Well, I mean, I also heard that NASA is doing actual development of warp drive technology and the actual faster than light travel, because the math works. They're just trying to find a practical way to generate the energy required to bend the fabric of space-time.
So mathematically we know that it's possible to move faster than light at this point?
Oh yeah, it's been mathematically proven for like 15 years. It was proven by some guy in Mexico, some Mexican astrophysicist who did the math. And
to move faster than the speed of light, or move at the speed of light in a curved space?
Well, no, you're not actually moving faster than light in a strict sense, but what you're doing is you're changing the dimensions of space around you so that you have the appearance of traveling faster than light, or have the effect of traveling faster than light, but physically you're not actually moving.
Yeah. It's like bringing two pieces of paper together, two ends of a piece of paper together and crossing.
Kind of.
In A Wrinkle in Time, that's called a tesseract, I think, if you know that novel by Madeleine L'Engle. But anyway.
Well, basically the idea is that you force space in front of you to constrict and space behind you to expand. And we already know that the fabric of space itself can expand and contract already. We just don't know how to physically force it to do that, or to encourage it to do that. Mathematically you can do it, but the energy required is astronomical. So apparently NASA is working. They're saying by 2018, I think it was, 2018 they're supposed to have, at the very least, a working prototype.
Everything's 15 years out when it comes from NASA.
Yeah, for what's it called? For a micro warp drive.
Or anything.
It may not be immediately practical on the macro scale, but they're saying that they should be able to do it with atoms and whatnot.
Oh, great! We can send our tweets to Mars at light speed.
Well, we're already
useful,
teleporting.
though.
we're using quantum entanglement for teleportation, so I'm surprised that we're not using quantum entanglement for communication as well.
Well, I think that the distances involved are quite obscene.
Yeah.
You know, there's a difference between a couple miles and a couple 100,000 miles.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Or kilometers, because we're Canadian.
Yeah. Kilometer.
So, kilometer. Okay, so back to Mars One. I don't know too much about it. I didn't read anything because nobody posted the link stuff in the fodder bucket. But whatever, we'll make sure that's in the show notes. But the principle sounds kind of cool. I mean, if governments are going to do it, it's going to be an international effort, and that's just going to add 20 years onto anything, right?
Yeah.
So, not to say that it wouldn't necessarily be a diplomatic achievement or even something worth attempting diplomatically, but
I mean, like the axiom says, the private sector can do anything the public sector can do, but it usually does it twice as fast and for half the cost.
And half as safe.
I think that, yeah, I hear you on the half is safe bit, for sure.
Although, I think the White House or, Ottawa or whatever, not that we have much of a space program, but...
well, Chris Hadfield's
I am going
up there now, so I wouldn't say that. We're in charge of the ISS right now.
Granted, but, I mean, there's a difference between NASA and CASA.
Yeah.
And their orders of magnitude.
Yeah, that's true.
But if you go back to that press release about this isn't the petition you're looking for, right? At the bottom of it, the White House is championing the privatization of space industry, and I think really the role in the future for bodies like NASA is going to be in traffic control and regulation.
Yeah.
It's not. They're done paving the roads. I mean, they've proved the concept, and we've had. Virgin is now doing their LEO. Well, maybe it's not even LEO. I think it's.
The company's called Virgin Space, basically.
Virgin Galactic.
Or Virgin Galactic. Sorry, yeah.
And SpaceX doing the majority of heavy lifter launches right now, from what I understand. So it's there. I mean, we have the privatization of space. So the question is, when's the first LEO hotel? That's and LEO being low Earth orbit, right?
Yeah.
So kind of in a similar orbit as to what the International Space Station is. I guess one can make the argument that the ISS has been a hotel for a select few, but on a more practical level, I mean, wouldn't it be kind of cool to pull out the $1 million that you have lying around in your back pocket and take a Virgin Galactic flight up to a hotel for a week? I mean,
it's one hell of a honeymoon position, right? Fuck Hawaii, I'm going to space. Come on, honey. Let's have some zero-G consummation, right?
Yikes.
And I think you'd have to be on your best behavior, and there'd be no stiffing the bar staff, because you don't want to get ejected from that place.
Yeah. When they kick you out, it's a long way down.
Space and hear you scream.
Right. Or what was the line from Star Trek Voyager? Excuse me, they returned to the surface. Anyway.
Yeah. So, okay, well, we're all excited about it. I mean, I don't know if
I'm
there's anything
less
more to
excited
say.
than I think the two of you. It sounds like a pretty cool idea, but my God. There's all kinds of issues with privilege and money and poverty and lack of medical care and all this sort of thing, and we want to...
Why is it that people always immediately assume the worst of private enterprise?
No, I'm not...
That always bothers me.
No, I'm not.
I think he's
I'm
talking
not
about prioritization of resources.
Yeah, that is what I'm talking about. I don't have an issue with the creativity of private enterprise. I'm just... the amount of money that would be required for that colony if it was distributed here on this planet in this society would go a long way, assuming that people were willing to distribute it correctly.
But see, the problem. See, this brings us back to what we were talking about last week. The whole thing about, it's their money. They can do with it as they wish, and if they want to use it to finance a space rocket to Mars, let them. If they want to use it to build a soup kitchen, let them. We do not have the right to tell someone other person what they can or cannot do with the fruits of their labor.
And nor can we predict the advancements that come out of such an innovative grasp. I mean,
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I'm being
'Cause
devil's
there's-
advocate here, folks. Like, but I am concerned that the prioritization of resources is still a live issue, and it speaks to the values of our culture. Yeah, sure, you can't restrict private enterprise, and people can do with their money what they wish. But
Well, they should be able to get rewarded for the risks that they take as well. I
we
mean,
can start taxing the churches.
going to space is
I
not
don't
safe.
have a
Going to
problem with that.
space,
Just
there's going to be a lot of risk involved,
yes,
right? I mean, even Curiosity had the 7 minutes of hell or whatever, right? Now
That
imagine
was
if
amazing.
I know. Now imagine if you've got a spaceship with 100 people on it, and that split-second thing can just end your $2 billion worth of investment. When you have that kind of risk, I think you're entitled to a little bit of reward, right? You have to be able to motivate people, right, to spend their money in a certain way. And by saying, well, yes, you can go to Mars, and yes, you can spend your money on a rocket, and yes, all this, yes, all that, but anything you find there doesn't belong to you. Nope, nope, nope. It belongs to everyone. And I think that's just wrong.
I'm not a convinced capitalist, at least not the way that we express it in our culture. I hear you about reward and whatever else, but I still wish that we would. This has bad political connotations in Canada, so I'm using it somewhat tongue-in-cheek, but maîtres chez nous, masters in our own house, thank you very much. Yeah, it just... that's what I have to say. It rubs me the wrong way.
Oh, okay.
It rubs me the wrong way that no one is seriously considering it. It will be a remarkable achievement, and I'll grin just as big as everybody else because, oh my God, we have a colony off-world. Isn't this cool? And there
And
are
so that
100
when global warming strikes and everybody dies,
there are 100
we
and there are
have a
100
reset
people
button.
and there are 100 people on the world, and only God knows how many billions of dollars we had to spend, and there are 2 billion people on this world who do not have daily access to fresh water.
Okay, so let me address that then. What we spend on science education and technological development and R&D is abysmal compared to what we spend on healthcare, on social services, on our social safety net as a whole, or even defense or education or anything else. I'm not picking on anything in particular. I don't know the specific numbers for Canada because I haven't done the research, but I recall Neil deGrasse Tyson testifying before the Senate, I think Judiciary Committee or something in the States, saying that what the United States spends on NASA's budget is 1/2 of 1 cent of every dollar in taxes collected. And the return on investment in terms of science education, in scientific literacy, in healthcare, in technological development, in our technological revolution, our industrialization, transportation, telecommunications, entertainment, you name it, has been exponential. Even if we were to double the budget of NASA, think how much, and it may not be a linear return on investment, but think how much more we would gain from that with very little sacrifice to these other things. I mean, we could take the money from defense, but this is a private enterprise doing this. So this isn't even the public wallet that's doing it. We can't anticipate where the social rewards are going to come out of it. I mean, we're talking about access to clean water, but we're also talking about sending a colony to another planet where they are going to have to generate their water out of the environment and out of the soil. If they can do
Out
so,
of their urine.
well, yeah, but you can't recapture all that indefinitely, right? You're still gonna need water processing facilities, and that type of technology would be absolutely invaluable in the third world. the type of stuff that they're going to have to come up with just to even reasonably attempt a colony on Mars is going to revolutionize healthcare here, of poverty here, of
I hope you're right.
Well, it's not a hope. It's actually, if they solve those problems, there will be real-world results that we can apply here, or real-world applications for those results.
Whether or not I agree with you. Whether or not they are distributed to people who actually need them is a completely different conversation.
Yeah.
Because the thing is, we have, and I'll if you do challenge me on this, I have some friends who are far more qualified than I that I'll get some links and put them in the show notes. But like, for example, currently we have enough food in the world for everyone to eat well.
Mm-hmm.
The problem, you're talking about refined carbohydrates, yes.
Lots of different things. For every human being in the world to have a minimally healthy diet in terms of holistic, enough protein, enough carbohydrates, and
we have enough raw calories available in food production today to meet the dietary needs of every person on the planet. And the problem is getting that food to them before it goes bad.
And part of that problem is that the distribution channels are fucked up because of government corruption.
It's not just government corruption.
There's a.
I mean, look at all the food aid that goes into like the Sudan that gets kidnapped by terrorists and warlords and stuff.
Yeah. But
so it's not just government corruption.
And we're talking about North American taxpayers which subsidized agriculture, so that wheat and corn gets shipped overseas. I mean, if it gets hijacked on the other end.
Well, I also saw a news report that said that 47% of all food that gets produced in the world gets wasted.
Mm-hmm.
That was on CTV a couple nights ago. I don't remember the full story, but that was the number that they spit out, was 47%. Nearly half of all food that gets produced doesn't actually end up being eaten at all, let alone by people who are hungry.
And this is the problem with the market as it is currently configured, among many other reasons. What I'm saying is that private enterprise can solve the problem, and it will not be implemented until there are fundamental changes in our distribution systems. So that has to do with food waste in terms of how it's transported. It has to do with governmental corruption. It has to do with the fact that many governments in the two-thirds world are being propped up by Western nations, and they function as oligarchies.
And foreign aid. Foreign aid has a big impact on keeping corrupt governments in charge in the third world.
Yes, it does. Yes,
but none of these are valid arguments against Mars One.
We're talking about prioritization of resources. We're not arguing about Mars One
the only person who has the right to prioritize any resource is the person whose labor it is that produces it. Right?
That's not what that's not what our current social contract says.
So it's kind of hard for me to accept somebody who isn't a farmer, who isn't, working every day to make food, to turn around and tell them to whom and how much they're allowed to sell their wheat. Right? Well, I'm sorry if somebody, right? I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. I remember I was watching a special about Stargate.
Okay.
And Richard Dean Anderson was talking about how he charges so much money for his services. And he doesn't do it because he's poor. He says, "Look, I don't need the money. But if I didn't have a huge price tag for me to do work, then everybody and their dog would be banging on my door trying to get me to do work for them. And by saying you need to be able to pay me $1 million an episode, it's a way to choose who's willing or who deserves or who's who's a more legitimate person for him to dedicate his time to." And I think just because he's an actor doesn't mean the idea of the concept is flawed, right? Because he's in control of a limited resource, Richard Dean Anderson acting time, and he uses money as a way to decide how to allocate it. In a world where we have infinite resources with, infinite transportation speeds, then yeah, there's absolutely no reason that anybody should go hungry, or anybody should not have something that they require or want.
Oh, but
right?
But we just said, but you and I agreed, Ducky, that that there is enough food in the world.
That doesn't mean there's enough energy.
There's not enough energy to move it around.
Sure there is.
Right?
Sure there is. Sure there is.
So,
where?
So, yeah, but my point.
All we need to do is, all we need to do. There's plenty of things that I'm not qualified to comment on, but the distribution system, so the energy being put into distribution, is bleeding. There was somebody, I forget his name, I'll look for it and put it in the show notes, but there was an economist from the African continent, I think he was from Ghana, and he said, look at folks, I am going to tell you something that we already know. Africa's begging bowl leaks. Okay, and his TED Talk was about how the distribution systems and corruption influence how much aid gets to the average African who needs the food. So that.
But you're using government corruption to indict capitalism, again.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
No,
of course.
That's bad. No, you use government corruption to indict government control.
Okay, well,
if there was a private enterprise that was in charge of distributing food, if they were motivated to do it, it would be done.
You're open. Well, but there are things
I'm saying there's where there's a will, there's a way, and I think what
which
we're
is
arguing
why
is that there's no will.
Works so well is that there is will for that to happen, but competing interests, whoever has bigger guns, wins, and so non-profits don't have the guns. They have the will, but not the ability, because the energy that they need to make it happen is being used against them or is bleeding away in distribution systems that are intentionally kept from functioning correctly. That's my point.
I think you have to back that up with some serious proof, dude.
Yeah, that it's intentionally being constructed to be inefficient distribution.
I mean, there's some greedy bastards out there, but not that greedy.
If we're dealing with government corruption, the reason why it continues to be corrupt is because people are intentionally keeping the systems that way. That's
because we're paying them to do it. That's what foreign aid does. It says you don't have to worry about your problems. We'll solve your problems for you. And then they say, well, if we don't have to solve our problems, then we're just going to not try to solve our problems. And we're going to try to milk it for all we can. I mean, you send foreign aid to food or whatever to, like, Palestine or, Sudan or some place where there's a corrupt government who says, or North Korea. North Korea is a good example. The World Food Program is going in there dropping off bags of wheat, feeding the people that the government should be doing. And the government says, oh, well, if you're going to feed my people for me, then the money that I would be spending to feed those people, I'm going to use it to build a nuclear weapon instead.
See, this is what I mean. This is what I mean. I don't understand why we think we're arguing about different things. Because the fact that North Korea does that, I'll assume that you're correct, Ducky, that's the attitude that North Korea has. The corruption that indicates, that is intentionally reinforcing an unhumane and corrupt system.
Yes.
And so what I'm saying is that
in a lot, doesn't lie so much with the government, it lies with the fact that we're giving them foreign aid. That's my point.
I think it's both, though. Like
because people will do what they're incented to do. You can't blame somebody for taking advantage of a situation that you set up to benefit them.
Governments are a choke point, right? They're monopolies, and they maintain their monopolies through regulation, distribution, and force. In order to meet the political wills and desires of those who work in it, whether it be the bureaucrats, the politicians, or those who elect them. So if I have a government monopoly on food production and what I'm going to do with excess distribution of it through subsidies and foreign aid programs, then it makes it inefficient for the free market to compete in that arena. And so it's no wonder that corruption comes out of that. My God, I'm sounding like a freaking libertarian. But it's true.
That's because it's the right way to go, man.
No, you know what? Whatever. I hate you. But it's true. Like, it makes
Don't hate
sense,
me
right?
because I'm right, baby. Don't hate me because I'm right.
So is that the same thing as don't shoot the messenger?
No. Well, kind of. It's the idea that's right. It has nothing to do with me.
Fair.
It's easy to indict capitalism and say that we should do everything publicly,
No,
but you know
well,
what?
that's not what.
See, the problem is
not
that it's
what I'm
easy to indict capitalism. It's easy to indict capitalism by its failures, but the problem with capitalism is it's very much there's really, really bad things that happen because of capitalism, like poverty, like homelessness, like drug addiction. You know, these kinds of things. Pollution, right? Corruption, governments, nepotism. That's bad, the bad side. But I mean, there's a huge good side to capitalism. There's huge benefits as well. And the thing is that
okay, what are they?
Capitalism is not.
Start listing them.
Capitalism is not a purely evil aspect. It's just the gulf between the bad and the good is much wider in a capitalist system than it is in a socialist system.
And getting wider. And steadily getting wider, and the gap between, well, I'll say the very rich and the very poor is worse in Canada than it is in the States, and it's abysmal in the States.
That's not true.
And I'm not talking about the gap between the rich and the poor. I'm talking about innovation and whatnot.
Okay, then
we'll have
and at the same time,
he said, she said in the show notes.
Yeah.
Because there's plenty of data.
Is that a bad
both
thing? Is that an inherently bad?
Yes,
why?
It's awful because these are human beings that have dignity. That our entire system is based on creating an underclass that we need to exploit. That is how
our system is based on creating or on rewarding merit and effort.
No, that is not.
No, man. Despite what some people may think, not all people are created equal. Okay? There are some people who are really good at what they do, and there are some people who are not really good at what they do. And I think that the people who aren't good at what they
created, that's socially constructed. We're not talking about conventional rights here. We're talking about
I'm not talking about it either. I'm talking about people that are good at what they do.
Okay, but
there's people who are successful and there are people who are not successful. And the reason that they're different from one another isn't because of the system, it's because of the individuals themselves.
Everyone, even in individualist societies, is influenced by the communities that they're raised in. So, not everyone is. I would never use the phrase when referring to ability or talent or whatever. I would never use the phrase everyone is created equal. Because a lot of that is social. It has nothing to do with your individual dignity as a human being. You have a particular aspect.
Yes,
correct.
Everybody has dignity.
I agree.
But
hold on.
My point,
and I don't know why you're not hearing me. I don't feel heard. Okay, we do not feed every human being in this country. We don't. We could, but we don't. Why? Because the system is actually designed so that some people are never fed. That is
I
how
disagree with that.
Well,
I think your whole viewpoint on this is backwards because you're using phrases like we could feed, we should feed. No, they should feed themselves. Just like I feed myself and Will feeds himself and you feed yourself.
What I mean
it's not my responsibility to see you fed, and it's not us as a collective's responsibility to see you fed. It is us as a collective's job to make sure you have the opportunity to provide yourself with your own food.
Okay.
There is nobody that is standing at the doors of a fucking Safeway saying, I don't like you, so you can't come in here and buy your food. I'm sorry. No.
Okay.
Sorry.
So even if I were to grant the distinction, okay? So So I'll grant the distinction that everyone should have the opportunity to feed themselves. And by the way, I don't think what I said actually contradicts that, because I think the social contract could be the communal agreement that we make as individuals, if we want to go here, could be everybody gets fed, but it's not. Everybody has the opportunity to feed oneself adequately. But the thing is, in this society, not everyone has the ability or the aptitude or the opportunity to feed themselves adequately. This is the distinction, even in the ancient world, between poverty and destitution. Okay? Because poverty, you've still got enough. This is from people like Aristotle. You've still got enough if you're poor. You're a subsistence farmer, you feed your family. Destitution is what happens when your society is functioning with such a high level of injustice that there are people on the bottom of... No, it is in Aristotle. I'm making the ancient argument here, okay? Because it's relevant to what I'm saying now. Societies intentionally structure it so that some people are actually squeezed out of the system, okay? They're completely marginalized. They're not allowed to participate.
See, I don't know if there's evidence for that.
I don't know how you're making that leap.
Okay.
That suddenly it's a conscious decision that we're going to pick, these 17 people and say you're not allowed to stay in.
The systems that we create squeeze people out. We usually don't pick them one by one. We would, as liberal Democrats, we would go, oh, that's discrimination and violation of individual rights and human rights and all these sorts of things. And of course, that's true. But the way that we design our systems and the way that we articulate our cultural values nevertheless squeeze out, and we don't close the gaps.
I don't get where you're getting this design thing from, though. It's not like there's some guy on a mountain with a pen designing how our society is built.
Guys, please.
It's an organic evolution of how people work together. It's just people doing stuff that benefits themselves. And if there's some people who are better at it than others, so be it.
So what do you do with societies like I'll look it up. It'll take me all of 30 seconds. But what do you do?
Okay, while you're looking it up,
here it is. African proverb. If you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Okay?
What's your point?
It's a completely different. Everything that you just said, Ducky, is premised on the single atomized individual is the sole arbiter of what is good in the world.
No. The single...
Guys, sorry. Hold on. I think there's a difference between intentionality of design to exclude people and the fact that we can't reach everybody in an efficient manner. There becomes a point of diminishing returns where in order to hit 100% compliance of feeding the entire population, it would take more resources than is justifiable.
I'm not pointing this criticism at you. I think that statements like that indicate a really amazing level of privilege, and given that we live in in terms of what some scholars call, the North American military-industrial complex, it's abysmal that people can actually make that kind of argument, given that, for example, the United States spends more on its military than the next 20 countries combined. Okay, and we make arguments like that there's a law of diminishing returns because we don't have enough resources. No, our priorities are fucked up.
That's not the argument that he made.
And that's not a fair comparison. Because if you look at societies that don't spend that type of money, that are highly socialist, they are still not able to meet those demands. So yeah, it's easy to pick on the bully, But let's look at more egalitarian societies who still can't make it happen, like socialist societies,
they're
communist
much
societies.
closer. They're much
No,
closer.
they're not.
The Scandinavian countries like Norway and Finland,
Yeah.
they're much closer to feeding their entire population than the United States is.
Yeah, but they've also got a 92% tax rate.
They don't. It's somewhere closer to 60. Come on.
Which is still twice as much as we have here, which affects the ability to compete on the global marketplace. And they don't have the same geographic dispersity that we do, which affects the logistics of it.
Right, because a
And-
lot of
and there are
if we're going to narrow it down to just Canada, a lot of the problems that we have with feeding our population is getting good quality food
Mhm.
up into the Arctic.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of the people that are struggling with finding food and stuff are Inuit communities along the Arctic Circle, right?
and
the reason
and
is
native
because they're
reserves
so,
in northern Manitoba, and yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, right.
Mhm.
It's because they're remote areas that it's difficult logistically to get anything into, be it food, be it medicine, be it people, be it radio waves, the internet. There's just, you have to understand that there's some places where it's really easy to move stuff around, and there's some places where it's really not that easy to move stuff around. And to say that we have the resources to feed everybody really is way too simplistic to understand the nature of the disparities between locations for that logistical transport.
So I think this is going to get a lot more nuanced than we can deal with in the remaining time, but this is a great segue into the I Don't Know More movement.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think so. Absolutely.
So, who wants to
Well,
explain?
I'll explain
gosh.
what I know, and then Bob can explain what he knows, because what we know seem to conflict.
Okay.
For those of you who don't know, Canada is in the New World, and because it's in the New World, it has Aboriginal peoples, Indigenous peoples. Now, when the Crown was over here, the British Crown, they at the end of end of the War of 1812, part of the help of having the Aboriginal peoples join the British in their attack against the Americans was that they would create an Indian nation or an Aboriginal nation. Tecumseh died, and the nation of Aboriginal peoples that he put together kind of dispersed, but the treaty was still there. And so what ended up happening is that through evolution of politics and policy, we've ended up with a bunch of reservations all over our country where Aboriginals are, intended to live the traditional lifestyle with their distinct society. And that the government is obligated to respect that. Now, unfortunately, what we're running into now is that a lot of the laws that were designed specifically to deal with that are causing a lot of hardships on these reservations. And it's not just the laws, but I think the laws, the Indian Act itself is probably the main root cause of all of the nonsense that's going on in reservations. So recently what had happened about a year ago, I think it was about a year, about as winter was approaching, we have a reserve in eastern Manitoba along the coast of the Hudson's Bay that is called Attawapiskat. And there was a news story broke that 200 or 150 members of the population or whatever were living in broken houses filled with mold. That was, there's 17 families jammed in one house. They didn't have electricity, they didn't have heating, and they were starving to death, and they were freezing to death. And there was this big outcry as to why is this such a bad reserve to live on? Why is there such problems there? And that kind of expanded to a more deep look, an investigation into how Aboriginal reserves in general are. And what we're finding now is that the government has no sovereignty. The government of Canada has no sovereignty whatsoever, no authority, no sovereignty over anything in a reserve. But they have the obligation or the responsibility to finance everything that goes on in the reserve. So what happens is the government gives the band and the band chief money, and they are supposed to use that money to provide for their people, just like any other municipal service. unfortunately, what has happened is some band corruption and some other problems have been meaning that the money is being misused, or it is going missing, or it isn't enough money, which I don't agree with the concept that it isn't enough money. So we have, aboriginals who are not legally allowed to own land. They are not legally allowed to sell land. They have no method of economic production because they have no ownership rights. And because of this, they are completely and utterly dependent on the money that the government gives the band, and that they have to trust in the band council to distribute that money fairly, equitably, and efficiently. And we got some bands that do it pretty well. They've got, same standard of living as the rest of the non-Aboriginal Canadians, but there are some bands that do it really poorly. And so recently what's happened is Teresa Spence, who is the chieftain of the Attawapiskat tribe, has gone on a hunger strike to demand a meeting with Prime Minister Harper.
And the Governor General.
No, that was after Harper said yes. So, and for the longest time, Harper was like, "No, I'm not dealing with. You want to talk to somebody in government? Talk to the Aboriginal Affairs Minister. That's his job. Okay? I did dictate policy for everybody, not just for you." And so she refused and refused and refused, and then finally, Harper said, "Well, look, I'm not going to meet with you personally, but I'll meet with the Assembly of First Nations," which is like a United Nations of First Nations bands in Canada, and that wasn't good enough. So now she wants to meet with the Governor General because the initial treaties were done with the Crown. In Canada, we have a representative of the Queen of England. The position's called the Governor General, and has no legal power at all. His job is basically to open Parliament and to dissolve Parliament, and that's it. So the Governor General says, no, I'm not going to, because I've got no control over policy. I'll meet you in a ceremonial meeting, but I'm not going to be at the policy meeting. Which, of course, so Harper said yes to meet Teresa Spence, and she changed it. And then the Governor General said, yes, I'll meet Teresa Spence, and she changed it again to saying, no, I want to meet Harper and the Governor General at the same time. On the sidelines of all of this is this growing protest movement by Aboriginal bands called the Idle No More movement. And what they have started doing now is they started out as peaceful protests, as marches and stuff, but now they've escalated into blockades and vandalism and sabotage of train yards, and now they have threatened to shut down the oil sands if their demands aren't met. And, you can tell my bias already that I have some antipathy towards the Idle No More movement. And while I will agree that some of their claims or grievances are meritorious and legitimate, the fact that Teresa Spence keeps changing her demands every time they're agreed to, and the fact that the Idle No More protests are becoming more and more violent, delegitimizes the whole claim, the whole argument, and it's really hard for me to support any kind of government policy that comes around from capitulating to these threats of violence.
I hope. I don't even know where to start, because number one, I think most of the aspects of what you just said might be a fairly good summary, but there were some statements right near the beginning that I'm like, I have no idea, and I really doubt that people who I know who are more informed than I am would agree with you about your history. First of all, almost every geopolitical nation state in the world has Aboriginal peoples, and in most of those geopolitical units, all of them have issues. So that's one thing that I'm not sure we would agree on.
I'm pretty sure that there's no
people,
indigenous people in England.
Probably because they killed them all. Okay, so then there's I hope that, because I've read articles in a couple different Canadian chain newspapers that suggest, for example, that a hunger strike is a terrorist act, and it's not.
Yeah, I would not agree with that.
Okay.
It's not a terrorist act, definitely.
So I'm glad we agree on that.
It is emotional blackmail, and it's certainly not something I would support, but it's not terrorism.
Well, okay.
I
don't think Mr. Harper is going to be responsive to any type of emotional blackmail.
Well, the thing too is I've also heard that
the
sabotage of the CN trail yards has been characterized as terrorism, and I don't really think that that's a fair comparison either. Even though it's pretty close to the line.
I haven't heard anything about native bands sabotaging CN. They blockade tracks, but I don't know about sabotaging equipment.
Okay, so let me interject here. I want to add maybe a little more clarity to this before we start getting into it. There has been problems with CN switching equipment in areas close to blockades, suspiciously close to blockades, but CN won't actually come out and say that it was sabotage because they lack the evidence to do so, but it's very suspicious to them. That's basically how they're framing it. And CN doesn't want to be involved in the disagreement. They're a transportation company, not a political body in a policy setting perspective, right? So, but beyond that, this doesn't just stem from the I Don't Know More movement doesn't just stem from what is happening at the Anahuasca tribe, and I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing that. Okay. It actually started here in Alberta. It's a local movement. Largely in response to Bill C-45, one of the things our Prime Minister has taken to doing, ironically enough, is pushing through omnibus legislation. And I say ironically enough because when he was the leader of the opposition, he stated that any government that uses omnibus legislation has lost the legitimacy to govern. And ever since he's taken power, he's done it consistently. And part of Bill C-45 makes changes to the Fisheries Act, the Navigation Act, and the Indian Act without consultation to those who it directly affects. Some of those things that are quite contentious. One of which in particular is it gives the Aboriginal Affairs Minister the right to call a vote of a band council or of a band on land claim issues or even land issues at all. And it requires the attendees as opposed to 100% of members to make the vote. So if only 50 people show up, that's the vote that stands. It also empowers the minister to ignore the vote entirely. So it basically gives the minister the unilateral power to take away land from these tribes. It's not without or it's not a far stretch to say the Conservative government has a history of retribution for those who disagree with them. So this has largely been a grassroots movement. The reason why, was it Teresa? Have I lost you guys?
Chief Spence's first name is Teresa, yes.
Chief Spence. I think Ducky has muted himself, but anyway.
Yeah, I'm still eating my chicken wings and I don't want to make chompy noises.
Oh, no, that's fine. Go back to that. So because this has become, it's stemmed as a grassroots movement, and Chief Spence has definitely been, in some circles, heralded as a leader of it, and others condemned because there's, audit irregularities with how she handled her band's finances. There's also division between the national leadership of the
Assembly First Nations.
The Assembly First Nations, thank you. A lot of people don't trust their elected members in the Assembly of First Nations. Right. So this is a multifaceted issue. It's the Indian nation or the Aboriginal, whatever. Sorry if I'm being politically incorrect. I'm not trying to be, but the Aboriginal nation within Canada. Nations, whatever. Sorry. I'm trying to reassert sovereignty, trying to take back control, trying to hold their members, their elected officials accountable, trying to hold our elected officials accountable. It's a huge mess. It's tensions that have existed in this country for a very long time. I don't think anyone in this call would disagree that the large situation of the Aboriginal population in Canada is very inequitable, and
Yeah,
definitely not up to our living standards.
I've been railing against the whole Indian Act, like the way our government has been, but I've been looking at it from the other side. I'm not really so concerned about the poor little Aboriginal people. I'm more from the government should not be held accountable for, the actions of other people type thing. That's the position I come from, but it's stemmed from the same thing, that there is an injustice in the Indian Act and it needs to be abolished. Because nobody benefits from it. I mean, it turns Canadian society into slaves, and it turns Aboriginal societies into, second-class citizens who are completely and utterly dependent on the goodwill of the government.
And it's political suicide for anybody that touches it. Trudeau tried, and if anyone was going to be even remotely successful with it, he would have been, and completely failed at it.
Trudeau for our American listeners, welcome.
Well, we have British ones too.
Fair enough. Is one of our most infamous or famous, depending on where you are, former prime minister.
He's the most influential prime minister, probably.
In recent memory, anyway.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed. Yeah.
So it's a long storied history, and somebody's echoing. Ducky, can you mute? Sorry, thank you. Maybe it's Rob. Whatever, it doesn't matter. It's a long storied history, and this is not something that is going to be easily solved. I mean, we're seeing flash mobs in local malls. People are taking over public squares, marching in the streets.
And I still think it's hilarious that Spence sent a letter to Buckingham Palace asking the Queen to order Harper to meet with her.
And so, part of it is we have a chief that's trying to deflect legitimate criticism in the midst of this movement, which is threatening to derail it. And so the AFN, or the Council of First Nations, whatever they're called,
Assembly of First Nations. The AFN is
fine. The AFN then, is trying to act as an intermediary because a lot of people don't trust Spence. The government doesn't trust Spence.
Well, look at the people who've been hanging out with her. Paul Martin, Tom Mulcair. I mean, I'm not surprised.
Okay, and so he's attacking the liberals in our country, and that's wonderful. So we have these three bodies, right? We have the grassroots, and we have the entrenched political class of the AFN and their leadership, trying to do their best, but mistrusted by our government and by their membership, and then our government, who nobody trusts.
Well, unless they do. But
nobody in this conversation.
Well, yeah. Granted.
So where does this go? I mean, are we looking at, a civil war? I mean,
it's very well. War. I have heard a lot of people. Yeah, I've heard a lot of people who have been saying, "I'm sick of the fucking Indians and all their bullshit. Send in the army." You want to blockade a fucking rail line? You send in the army. You start shooting them, and you get them off our fucking land. And I'm like, that's not going to solve any problems. That's just gonna remember what happened at Oka?
Yeah.
Oka, yeah.
Okay. For our Oka is a small reserve that I believe was in near Montreal, or it's in southern Quebec anyway. And they, back in the late 90s or something, they had the same kind of thing. They were going to blockade highways until the Quebec ministers met with them or whatever. And they sent in the military, and a bunch of people were killed on both sides. Most of them were Aboriginals, but there's a huge, big uproar about it, and it damn near spilled over into a larger conflict. But that is, especially if you have, right now we've got the guy from Edmonton or Fort McMurray or whatever saying he's going to be shutting down Highway 66 and shutting down or 63 or whatever, shutting down the oil sands, and there are people who will not tolerate that kind of behavior, whether they're law enforcement or not, because now we have cops who are defying orders even. Did you hear about this Sarnia thing?
Go on.
Okay, CN went to the courts and asked for an injunction to basically ban the Aboriginal blockades. Protests are fine, but if they get on the tracks, they need to be removed from the tracks. And the judge said, yes, this is legitimate. It's private property. You're trespassing. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to send in the police, and we're going to put up some lines or whatever. And if you want to have your protest, that's fine, but you can't have it on the tracks. And the cop said, I don't think so. We're just going to go to Tim's and chillax for a while. So now, not only do we have police officers who are not policymakers, they're not even policy interpreters. Their job is the enforcement of the law, defying the law.
Well, so they're being good libertarians.
Yes, but they're not. When you're employed as an agent of the state, your job is to be an agent of the fucking state.
Well,
if you're employed as an agent of the state and you refuse to be an agent, that's treason, is what it is.
So I'm of a mixed mind on this Sarnia thing. I honestly think that if you're given an unconscionable order, you should refuse to follow it. However, I wonder if this meets that test.
I don't think it does.
Well,
because we have a right to peaceful protest, and blockades are not peaceful.
I don't think I agree with you. I don't think I agree with you. I think that blockades can be. They're not always.
You don't think they exert force?
I do not. I think that blockades are a typical, or can be. I'm not saying they always are. I think they can be. They can fall within the umbrella that's broadly understood as nonviolent resistance. Yes.
No, it's
because
absolutely violent.
the point of nonviolent resistance is to make the larger body who is interpreted as oppressing you, or who is oppressing you, depending on your perspective, look stupid. Mm-hmm. Okay? But that
isn't their point. At least that's not what they're. I mean, maybe in these local situations, but I'm not sure if you heard the outcomes of, Friday's meeting, which was granted by the Governor General and the Prime Minister, I might add.
Yes.
So she did get her wish, even though she refused to attend because she kept changing it. But
she didn't get to meet them both together.
She actually did attend, but didn't get to meet both of them together. She went to the ceremony, is what I read.
And she refused to meet with Prime Minister Harper. But anyway, it's not about Miss Spencer, Teresa. It's the rhetoric that followed after that, when we're hearing from Aboriginal leaders in the I Don't Know More movement that, they are going to blockade Highway 63 and shut down the oil sands. And if things don't see traction by Thursday, they're going to cause massive disruption to the transportation systems and handicap the economy.
Yeah,
that was the exact threat.
I think the exact phrase was, "We will bring the economy of Canada to its knees," and there is no way that you're going to try to. There's no way you can convince me that's non-violent, passive resistance.
Them's fighting
that
words.
that is domestic terror.
It's not. I don't. Maybe it's just I'm not used to the way that you use language. It's non-violent resistance is not the same thing as being passive.
It is violent. Okay, but it's definitely violent.
When
you stand
by
in
whose definition of violence? Because
Wikipedia.
Honestly, and I'm not trying to be thick-headed, but obviously it's obvious to me, a state that wants to maintain its interests is going to have a different definition of violence than people who perceive themselves as experiencing oppression. Okay? And so the minority group that resists, well, you're domestic terrorists, you're going to ruin our economy, you need to go through proper channels. All of these arguments have been made to other movements in the past, some of which had a violent edge. The civil rights movement, in terms of African American folks, had violent edges, and because the movement had violent edges, a whole bunch of people said, "Oh, shame on you, your goals are not legitimate." the vast majority of that movement,
Um,
however, were nonviolent resistors that implemented that strategy brilliantly, and it's not appropriate for the people who have had most of the power in history to tell these uppity fill in the blank to behave themselves. It's not appropriate.
And I would concur with that. I mean, I think the fact that
Yeah,
there is,
that's
and I
way
hate
off
the word
topic, though.
uprising,
I
but
don't think
whatever you
so.
want to call it.
I don't
You
think so.
know,
I'm trying to give you my perspective on why a blockade isn't necessarily violent, and even why.
Okay, well then how okay, if like I don't see how it's not violent. You are exerting force to interrupt somebody else's business.
But
Okay? If
but
you're
if
trying to
your
get if you're trying
business
look,
is
if
oppressing
you're trying
me and bringing harm to me,
that doesn't change that it's violent. I'm not saying whether or not it's justified. I'm saying that it's
oh,
violent.
you've got I
Don't you know what violence is? The exertion of force in order to attain a specific goal. That's what
no,
violence
that's
is.
far too
Directed
neutral.
force.
No, no.
That is all violence is. That's violence from shaking your baby to pounding on a door to slamming your car door to pulling out a chain gun and mowing down a whole field of people. It's all the exertion of force for a direct goal.
okay, you know what?
Okay, but
I think this is a great nuanced argument, but it's getting a little pedantic, and it has nothing to do with the issue at hand. I'm serious. I mean,
The point
I'm
is, my contention is that I reject any sort of statement that the Idle No More movement is a purely nonviolent.
I didn't
act.
say it was purely nonviolent. I said that we need to pay attention to the movement because most of it, and I'm still not convinced that most of the stuff that you're interpreting is violent is actually violent. But
Well,
even
talk
if
to the train drivers who are getting their trains knocked over.
knocked over,
Freaking talk to the people whose jobs are being disrupted and ask them if it's violent or not.
are they still getting paid?
not necessarily. And here's what I'm scared
Well,
of.
but-
Hold on, please let me
Go ahead.
refine your thought while I get a chance to express mine, if you wouldn't mind. Sorry, you guys are exhausting to jump in between. I tell you, but anyway, I love
Very
it.
nice,
Just on
Vice.
both sides, and you're stuck in the middle.
I understand the merits. I totally want to be on the Aboriginal side. I see them as our neighbors, and I want them to be our friends. And I know that sounds really bad, and that's not that they can't be, but that's more of a regret for me for not trying to make that effort. But, and here's the royal but that screws up everything. There's a lot of emotion tied into this, and the actors on the Aboriginal side are very young. 50% of their population is under 25.
Yes.
On the other side, the majority of the people who are making the decisions to react are really old, really entrenched, really conservative, and really scared. And when we have a fragile economy and I'll say it, a bit of a tyrant of a prime minister,
Where does the fear come from?
well, I'm getting to that. When
Okay,
people are threatening the economy, which has been a huge stress point for anyone that's been alive and, coherent for the last 10, 15 years.
Sure.
And I mean, the economy is always an issue, but, it's this whole recovery thing. We're on a rebound. And we're also dealing with, we have an image problem in Alberta with our oil already, which is affecting the price of Alberta crude. Now, if we add on an international Aboriginal problem, that's going to further disrupt the market, and maybe legitimately so. But that affects people's livelihoods, and that puts stress on them, and that lends itself to support for radical action on behalf of the government. And what I'm really scared of is that this government won't show the restraint.
I'm not really worried about that.
Go ahead.
I'm more worried about vigilante reaction. Because I would be really surprised if the government decided to send in the army. I would really be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if there were some police actions, and I think that can be easily supported or justified, especially in the face of some of the disruptions. If they do escalate, if people start getting hurt, if property start getting even more damage than it already is, you have to challenge that kind of behavior sometimes, and you can't just let disruptive, violent vandals run around unrestrained or unchallenged.
Absolutely.
But like I said, what I'm more concerned about is vigilante justice. I'm more afraid of, or more concerned. I'm not afraid, but I'm concerned that some poor Alberta farmer is going to see a bunch of Aboriginals marching through his land or something on their way to a blockade, and he's going to start pocking at them with a shotgun or something. And that's probably more likely to cause the problems to escalate, I think, something like that.
I hope that we don't sound like we probably do, so I just want to flag it for my own sanity. I wonder if we sound like three privileged white boys that don't actually...
There's that word privilege again.
Yep.
Okay,
privileged white boys who don't...
Privilege is just a catch-all for something you don't like.
No, actually, what the fuck is going on? So, I hope that if there's anyone on the ground with more insight than the three of us have into I Don't Know More, or if there are Aboriginal friends who are listening to this, I really hope that you'll contribute to the discussion, because this discussion is not meant to... I hope not anyway. I get really uncomfortable in drawing firm conclusions even in our own minds based on... I certainly haven't had the opportunity to talk to anyone, with one exception. I haven't had the opportunity to talk to Aboriginal people about their perspectives on I Don't Know More. The person... Go ahead.
Here's the reality: is if we're talking about it with this type of fear and tenor, and nobody wants this to happen, nobody's advocating it, okay, but whatever. I like I said, I worry about this, and you're starting to see it crop up, the sentiment crop up in the media. You can hear the anxiety when people are talking about it, and so you're a little more rational about this than I am, and that's completely fine. And I'm probably way off base, and God, I hope I am. I really worry that this type of anxiety and fear is permeating in conversations around the country, and that it's becoming divisive. And I know the I Don't Know More movement in the AFN are trying their best and to make this a Canadian issue and not an Aboriginal issue. And I really hope that people hear that. I hope people hear that, this Indian Act is flawed, this Bill C-45 is flawed, this omnibus
system
that our Prime Minister have is flawed, that we have some really deep, serious cultural flaws and political flaws in this country that we need to deal with together, and that we got to check our rhetoric, and threatening each other's economies and livelihoods is not the way to do it.
Yeah, that's my biggest concern, is because I have already said that there is, some merit to the grievances brought up by the I Don't Know More movement, and there are legitimate concerns about all of these issues. But the second you turn to violence, it really derails any goodwill that you're because the thing that really always seems to be lost on these people is it's not Aboriginals versus the government. It's not Aboriginals versus Canada. It's not Canada versus the government, right? We're together in this, and we need to work together. We need to see each other as partners. And you can't be blading your friend and then expect him or her to have goodwill towards you.
I hear that, but I'm not saying that I'm... Well, we keep saying it, so there will be dozens of puns throughout our podcast about how hardly qualified we are. But it's
who's sick of that yet?
Exactly, right? But I think that a lot of folks in this country, and I don't know who the we I'm speaking to is, so just permit me a slight thought experiment. If you've got a situation where people, like a people group being represented by a single person in this image, if I have my foot on your neck and I look down at you and I say, my friend, I'm going to take my foot off your neck. Now, calm yourself, okay? It is actually completely reasonable that this person who I took my foot off, because I might realize, oops, I'm being oppressive, or oops, there's a serious problem that we actually need to be partners on. But because the power differential has been so entrenched, it shouldn't actually surprise me when the first thing I get is a violent outburst that sounds a lot like, "You're a fucking asshole." Okay? And
But it's a big difference between pulling a knife.
sure.
Yeah.
Sure,
I got no problem with expressing displeasure.
But even if a weak, because someone that I have made weak, because and I hope that our listeners appreciate the irony of this, because I live with cerebral palsy, so I'm not going to be putting my gimpy foot on anybody's neck. But if my foot is on your neck and it's been there for days and you're weak and not well fed and gagged, if I take my foot off your neck and you pull a knife, how shocked do I get to be?
Well, no, you shouldn't be shocked. But my point is that if you're taking your foot off of the person's neck and saying, "Look, I'm sorry, let's go buy you a meal," and then he pulls a knife, I'm not buying you a fucking meal. No way.
Well,
And that's what's going on
wonder.
here. The government's saying, "Look, there are legitimate grievances here. Let's work together and figure out what's going on." He met with the Assembly of First Nations, and you still have people who are saying, "Well, we're gonna tank the economy. Watch it."
And the government has been trying to address this issue for 30 years.
Yeah.
And there isn't consensus within the Aboriginal community as how to do it. I mean, there is equal amount of, I wouldn't say equal amount, but there is definitely a significant amount of people who are for the Indian Act within the Aboriginal community and things within it as are
against it. They get
$24,000
a year free just for having brown skin.
Well, no, not necessarily, and even so, that's illegitimate. If that's a treaty stipulation, so be it. We don't need to get into that, and I know that's not universally true.
Yeah, it's not universally true, but
the issue is there's no clear voice, and nor is there ever going to be a singular voice coming from the Aboriginal community. There sure as hell isn't one from the rest of us.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, because there's 600 or something different bands, right? And they're all individual little municipalities.
But people need to realize that we're trying.
Yeah.
And we need to have the discussion. This is not going to be something that's going to be solved by Thursday.
Yeah, and it's impractical to expect us to have 600-700 different treaty negotiations with each and every separate little band. I mean, we don't do it with cities. That's why we have provinces, right?
But I think I need to be corrected, but my understanding is there are a much smaller number of treaties in total than there are bands.
Yeah, well,
you're also talking about land claims too, right? Mm-hmm. Which number more, and there's a process for that.
Yeah,
there's the land claims review board.
I mean,
it's something that we came up with, I think, in the 80s. I could be wrong on the date. I know it's within the last 30 years.
But yeah, the end result is that this is not going to be solved in a day, and this sort of violent rhetoric coming out of the Idle No More movement is really going to put the caution into the people around them, whether these are whether we really want to be dealing with these people or not.
That's well said.
The thing that I just want to say in very conclusion on my end is that I hope that the cautiousness that you express, Ducky, doesn't turn into yet another sort of institutional slow change tomorrow sort of thing. Yeah, because there are systemic changes that need to happen as soon as possible, please. In the way that we deal with things.
Yeah, we need to repeal the Indian Act.
Among other things. But we need to repeal the Indian Act and still somehow honor the structure that we have for treaties.
It's got to be replaced with something that's equitable.
Yes, indeed. And I
don't agree with that. I really don't like this idea that we have two classes of citizen in this country.
No.
We have Aboriginal citizens who have special privileges and special rights just because they're descended from a selected group of people.
No, I actually think, Ducky, that's a very common misconception that when you actually talk
and re-educate.
okay, then
We gave our word.
would,
We got to stand by it.
well, yeah, and I think too that when, because this has happened several times on Facebook, I'd be willing to bet, Ducky, that if you sought out some knowledgeable Aboriginal folks in your community and sat them down and said, okay, then you know that they don't have special rights. Because
if
most
they're reserve
Aboriginal
Indians, they do. No. If they're reserve, they're treaty status Indians, they absolutely do.
Because just because they
It's not
have a
without
treaty
consequence.
doesn't mean.
Oh no! I'm not
don't
saying
have
it's just
special
pure
rights.
special privilege, because they also don't have the right to own land. They don't have the right to vote in Canadian Parliament. They don't have. There's a lot of bad things that come with being a status Indian as well.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to deny that.
Legal
Right.
morons.
So
What I'm saying is that
I
we need to be able to treat our citizens equally without deference to their, racial or.
Here's the distinction, though, Ducky. They're not our citizens.
Yeah, like
They
the
really
language
aren't.
of our native people, just let's try to avoid that. And I think we should also drop from the rhetoric phrases like those Aboriginals have special rights. I think that because what you've been saying so far, Ducky, is marvelously nuanced, and we can get somewhere. And then rhetoric like that comes out, and it throws people for a loop because it sounds like unthoughtful conservative voices in our society.
Well, it's just frustrating. That's because. All I hear about is poor little me, 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 all the fucking time out of the reserves. And I just, I hate crybaby bullshit.
I really,
and it makes it really hard for me to say sometimes some of you people have a better life than I do, and you're still crybabying about shit. It makes it really hard for me to have sympathy for them. That's all.
It's a valid feeling, whether or not it's legitimate based on evidence.
Well, no, I'll admit that sometimes it can be an emotional outburst, but.
Well, I just again, like I had some people back in grade 11, Ducky, because we were watching Chief Dan George and Little Big Man, which is a movie if people don't know it, and read this wonderful speech of his called to my very good dear friends, and it was so and my honest reaction in class was, he's whining, shut him up. Okay? And this was before, and then I had some people start to challenge me on, that's probably a racist sentiment. And so after I saw Little Big Man, Mrs. Jennings, my English teacher,
I remember her.
I know, she's brilliant. I loved her.
Hargrove was the best, though.
I agree. Hargreaves was his name.
Hargreaves. Yeah.
Okay, but anyways, so Mrs. Jennings turns to me and says, "Do you still think that speech was a whine?" And I said no, because a lot of people carry themselves with such dignity and graciousness, and the way that they live, especially Aboriginal elders that I know. And certainly the National Anglican Indigenous Bishop, they have lived through so much, and they are so gracious in gradually educating the average, Canadian, non-Aboriginal Canadian about here are the issues and here are the systemic things that are still going on that we need to fix. And they're able to consistently, even in a room full of people that stand up and start accusing them of whining, they're still able to come back with such graciousness. And I don't think we should be too harsh with people that are sick to death of dealing with capital W white folks that think Aboriginal folks should stop whining.
No, I'm not saying they should stop whining. I'm saying we should get the fucking problem solved.
Yes.
because I'm sick of listening to the complaints over and over and over again.
No, that's not the reason you solve the problem. You solve the problem because people have dignity, and it doesn't matter. They can keep speaking until the problems are solved, and it has nothing to do with how sick and tired you are. The solution has to be implemented because we actually believe that everyone around us has the same human dignity that we do.
I just find it, I just find it hard to reconcile this whole, they're not our people, they have their own sovereignty, they have their own laws, their own legal system, their own education system, they're completely separate, distinct society from Canada. They're just within our borders. And if you're the Mohawk one in southern Ontario, you're across the American border as well. And yet, at the same time, our government, which has no authority over anything that Aboriginal bands decide to do, is consistently being held responsible for decisions it doesn't have the power to make.
And that's a legitimate gripe, I think.
And that's why I call it whining, because they keep complaining that the government isn't doing this, the government isn't doing that, the government isn't doing this. It's not our job to build them schools. It's not our job to build them hospitals. It's not our job to provide the necessities of life for their people. It is our job.
Right.
It is our job to give them the money to do it themselves. And some bands do it really well. Some bands don't do it at all. Mm-hmm. So, anyway, we're going in circles now, and I have to leave right away,
all right,
so
well,
let's wrap this up.
Fair enough.
So why don't you give us your final thought there?
Go Mars 1. Boo on the Death Star. I think Mars 1 should consider putting a colony on the moon first, rather than just making the first jump to Mars. But I think that's a great idea. Aboriginals, there's a big problem, but violence isn't going to, get anybody to give them any goodwill. And anything that is, any kind of cooperation that is exerted or extorted under duress is going to be suspect at the best of times. So I really think that this escalation of the Idle No More movement is going to be more counterproductive than they think it's going to be.
Rob?
I think in contrast, I'm very glad that the Idle No More movement is there. I think that it exposes a lot of systemic violences that are going on in society, and like we've tried to do here, people and peoples actually need to talk to each other in order to start solving the problems.
Okay. Myself, I think, you know what? Wob Canoe did a series last year with CBC. I think it might even be available on cbc.com/ca/DocZone called Eighth Fire. Addressed a lot of Aboriginal misconceptions by Canadians on Aboriginal society and kind of who they are, where they are, and what they want. That may be a good place to start. CBC, Peter Brooks and Mansbridge also did a pretty good, Idle No More 101. But I think that ultimately this is a good catalyst for a conversation and maybe the ability to reintegrate, and I hate the word integrate because of the connotations, but to start the conversation or, build the friendship, as it were. And I just hope people don't overreact. I mean, remember, our government is of us. It is the people. It's not the Death Star, no matter how much the Americans want to build one. So I guess I hope to see you all on the other side, smiling and. This is.
Why can't we all just get along?
Yeah, why, man? You know what? This is totally doable, and it only takes that one person, right? And I just hope he doesn't show up.
And that person is not Teresa Spence.
No, you know what I mean? It takes one person to initiate an act of cascading violence, and that's what I'm scared of, and I really hope it show up. So, but beyond that, and I don't necessarily think that that's going to be an Aboriginal person. If anything, it's going to be, like you said, some drunk
poor Alberta farmer who's got
Alberta. And not that I have anything against people in Northern Alberta. I was born in Northern Alberta, but I know what they're like.
There's
the other half of our audience, but anyway, you know what?
They're half of your hosts too, man.
You have a great time in the UK.
Thank you.
Or you're having a good time right now. Because
fair enough. Yes.
Yes.
Maybe we can catch up with you when you're there. Maybe we'll be able to make that work. If not, we'll find a paltry substitute for your presence. Ducky, you have a good night at work, and we'll see you all next week. Please check out the website and continue posting comments. Email us, rant at us. We know we've made mistakes on some things, so please tell us what they are.
Hardly
we only
qualified.
learn.
Hardlyqualified.com or .ca, correct?
Yeah, well, we prefer .ca, and of course, subscribe to us on iTunes. Tell all your friends and all your enemies. Thank you very much for your time, and we'll see you next week.
We're a great weapon to inflict people with if you don't like it.
Okay, guys, we out.
Thank you for listening to Hardly Qualified. Our website can be found at hardlyqualified.ca, and there you can download episodes, leave comments, and check references and links mentioned in the shows. The hosts are on Twitter. Will is at Will Conner, Rob is at TheologyWriter, and Ducky is at AngryDuck_HQ. They can also be reached by email at Will, Rob, or AngryDuck at hardlyqualified.ca. The podcast is recorded on Saturday afternoons and scheduled for download the following Friday, which can also be found on iTunes. Thank you, and tune in next week.